Sub 2 of Article 108, the investigation of the credentials does not include the validity of the election list as published by the Central Voting Bureau. 3, the investigation of the credentials of the persons who have been declared elected according to the stipulation of Article 115 does not include matters concerning the validity of the voting. Coming now to the Rules of Order of Parliament, Article 2, each newly elected member of Parliament provides proof of his election by submitting to Parliament the documents prescribed by law constituting his credential. Article 3 of the Rules of Order of Parliament, Parliament appoints a committee of 3 members which has the task to verify the credentials of the members of Parliament, and the first appointed committee member shall be the President of the committee. If Parliament has not yet approved the credentials of the newly to be admitted members after a periodic resignation or after the dissolution of Parliament, the committee is appointed in a public gathering in which at least half plus 1 of the legally elected members is present. Continuing with the Rules of Order, Article 4 stipulates the committee reports in writing or verbally after having verified the credentials, the other documents as required, and those received pertaining to the election. The credentials and the documents related to them will be made available for perusal by the members of Parliament at the Secretariat of the Clerk. Before going over to appointing the members of the committee to verify the credentials, let me remind members of Parliament of the allotted speaking time of 20 minutes in the first round of this agenda point and 10 minutes in the second round, if necessary. So I look to see if we have any member wishing to speak at this time. That is not the case. So I will now go over to the appointment of the committee members. As members of the committee, I will appoint MP Sylvia Jacobs, who is also the chairperson of the committee, MP Omar Otley, and MP Richnel Brugge. I now ask the clerk to hand over the credentials and the pertaining documents to the committee so the committee can verify these. Members of Parliament, please note that the meeting of Parliament is not adjourned while the committee verifies the credentials of the elected members of Parliament. At this time, the committee is collecting the documents from the Secretary General of Parliament as the other members take their seat. And again, I remind all that this meeting is not adjourned during the vetting of the credentials. I now give the floor to the chairperson of the committee for the verification of the credentials of the MPs-elect. I give the floor to MP Jacobs. MP Jacobs.
Madam Chair, the committee has verified the credentials and all the documents that have been submitted are in order and as the law prescribes. We advise for Parliament to approve the credentials of Mr. Richinal S. J. Brugge, Mr. Egbert J. Doran, Ms. Melissa D. Gums, Mrs. Grisha S. Helliger-Martin, Mr. Artwell M. R. Irian, Mr. Viren V. Kotai, Mr. Francisco A. La Cruz, Mr. Lyndon C. J. Lewis, Mr. Luke F. E. Marcelina, Mr. Franklin A. Myers, Mr. Omar E. C. Otley, Ms. Shamira D. M. Roseberg, Ms. Ludmila N. L. DeWeaver, Mrs. Sarah A. Westcott Williams, and Mr. Darrell T. J. York.
Thank you, MP Jacobs, Chairperson, as well as the other members of the committee for executing this important task for Parliament, and you are hereby discharged of your duties. Thank you once again. Propose to approve the credentials of the following MPs-elect: Mr. Brug, Mr. Duran, Ms. Gums, Mrs. Grisha Heiliger-Martin, Mr. Artwell Irion, Mr. Viren Kotai, Mr. Francisco La Cruz, Mr. Lyndon Lewis, Mr. Luc Mercelina, Mr. Franklin Myers, Mr. Omar Otley, Ms. Shamira Roseberg, Ms. Ludmila de Weaver, Mrs. Sarah Westcott Williams, and Mr. Darrell York. Does Parliament agree with this proposal? I see no objections to the proposal by the committee for the approval of the credentials of the members mentioned. And now that the Parliament has agreed to approve the credentials of Mr. Brug, Mr. Duran, Ms. Gums, Mrs. Heiliger-Martin, Mr. Irion, Mr. Kotai, Mr. La Cruz, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Mercelina, Mr. Myers, Mr. Otley, Ms. Roseberg, Ms. De Weaver, Mrs. Westcott Williams, and Mr. York, I will, in accordance with Article 122, Paragraph 1, subletters A, B, and C of the Election Ordinance, immediately notify the Governor, the Vice Chair Lady of the Central Voting Bureau, and the persons admitted. Before going over to congratulating the incoming members, I want to mention that we had also received a notice of absence from the member La Cruz. I omitted his name when mentioning those who had given notice for this meeting. So having said that, I now want to congratulate all the 15 members elect with their admittance as members of Parliament. As soon as they are sworn in by the Governor on Friday, September the 20th, 2024, they will take their place in Parliament as members of Parliament. Congratulations to the members-elect. Before I close this meeting, however, I would like to remind the admitted members that they have to submit a request to the Governor to administer the oath or declaration and affirmation as prescribed by law. The Secretariat of Parliament is able to assist members of Parliament-elect who require assistance. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting. I thank you all for your participation, and I hereby close this meeting of Parliament. Meeting closed.
Are you SXM insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXM is cardless. Request your My SXM account today and enter the virtual office of SXM. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXM, yeah. Your social health insurances.
It's hurricane season. Are you prepared? Here are a few tips to remember to help keep you and your family safe. If you're not in an area that is advised to evacuate and you decide to stay in your home, plan for adequate supplies in case you lose power and water for several days and you're not able to leave due to flooding or blocked roads. This hurricane season, make a family emergency communication plan. This public service announcement was brought to you by the government of St. Martin.
In its report, the delegation gives an overview and explanation of the efforts of the Parliament towards intensifying parliamentary regional cooperation and the Parl-Americas institution. Also, a summary of the assembly and network meetings that the delegation participated in and conclusions and recommendations by the delegation. In its report and the cover letter, the delegation advises the Parliament of the following. 1. The Parliament of St. Martin should continue to be informed of Parl-America's activities and make use of what is offered, including collaborations with the other islands in the Caribbean region and the countries in Latin America. 2. In the proposal to Parliament, is to ensure that Parliament committees meet more frequently with NGOs and go into the communities to garner information. Thirdly, it is advised that Parliament seeks to participate in more similar forums. Fourthly, Parliament is being advised to ensure that Parliament closely examines our media law in St. Martin. Fifthly, the Parliament is being advised to ensure that the Parliament, via its committees, focuses more on topics. Sixth, Parliament is advised to look into making changes, such as having the ad hoc committee integrity be established as the Committee Integrity and Open Parliament, looking at the format of the question hour, creating a better understanding with government as it pertains to the continuation of meetings, establish a committee for climate change, encourage the committee district councils to go out to the councils in their districts, and evaluate current committees and their topics. Seventh, and lastly, the delegation advises and informs Parliament that, based on the experience and sentiment shared by the entire delegation and the cost involved, the delegation considers the Parl-America's platform to be beneficial to the functioning of the Parliament of St. Martin and therefore advises that the Parliament of St. Martin becomes an associate member of the Parl-America's organization. Is there any member to whom I can give the floor at this time?
Internally, but I think for the people of St. Martin to understand, especially with the experience that I have had in Par-Latino meetings, vis-a-vis these, that I see that this organization, Parl-Americas, really has an added value for St. Martin. And I would, though I'm not going to be here to benefit from those discussions further, at that level, I would really like to encourage the members of Parliament to focus on the advice that our delegation put forward. These are advices that I believe will strengthen the functioning of Parliament. There's a lot of stigma surrounding whether members of Parliament function or do not function. And it is definitely my goal to see that the committees really become what they should be, investigative meetings, whether held in front of the camera or not, but definitely to increase public participation and involvement in the process, the democratic process. It is imperative that the committees, especially the one for community, goes out to the different communities to ensure that the people's voices are heard and there is that inclusive participation. Madam Chair, of course, you would know that the gender equity agenda is something that I believe in totality as government and parliament we must look at when we talked about effective representation in public office regardless or even in society. That women have equal opportunities as men to do and be in spaces where decisions are being made. And so I 100% support the advice of the committee and look forward to further follow-up from those meetings, as well as the ones that I see on the agenda coming up today, that they will be approved so that St. Martin can make use of the regional discourse that is necessary for us to progress as a developing country.
I wanted to just perhaps give a little bit of my view that hopefully my colleagues will take away. The Parlaméricas, for me, in what I see of it in terms of its added value, is the fact that you're dealing with the majority of the Caribbean islands in it. And you have also a similarity or commonality in the fact that it is English-based. You have people that are also there from Belize and Honduras normally. And while it is not required to be speaking in a tongue that is not our mother tongue, I do feel like we should consider the benefits of being there, especially when we're having reports to bring back into Parliament of the benefit of being part of these organizations. Also to my colleagues to assess whether or not that further participation in Parlaméricas is more warranted than, for instance, Parlatino, where we don't get a return on in terms of reporting that you would get. And I would also like to guide everyone to remember the report that we got from the audit chamber, just for us to make sure that everything that we participate in here in Parliament is really to contribute to all of our sort of awareness, where we can bring things back to the country and improve and take examples from our neighboring islands. While I do know that other parliamentarians in the past have actually taken back a lot more from Parlatino, but what we have seen lately, and in my experience lately, is that, you know, other than being in Panama, as I discussed with another parliamentarian that was there before at the events of Parlatino, trying to compare the two is something that we need to do right now in order to see what is the best participation.
But I do know that based on what I have read about it, there's a lot to be spoken about, but we need to experience, I need to experience it first to give my own input on it. I do believe that whatever you do and whatever you bring back and however you apply it to St. Martin is the most important focus. In regards to Parlaméricas, I have experienced that for the first time. It was quite positive. Till this date, I am in contact with different persons that I have met during the work visit and also brainstorm with them on different topics. One of the topics that was highlighted, in my opinion, was the media-related topic in regards to the media laws. And I do believe, for example, here on St. Martin, that is something we need to look closely at. So from now, I do believe that Parlaméricas should be an added value to St. Martin. And yes, I'm looking forward to more visits to Parlaméricas to bring back more knowledge to St. Martin.
Regarding the visit by Parlaméricas, and before I continue, let me also add that Parlaméricas is very keen on getting St. Martin not only involved in their meetings and what they call their networks, which can be considered sort of committees of Parlaméricas, but also to find ways and means for St. Martin to become an active and formal member of Parlaméricas. So again, just by adding that, then I want to continue and propose the following: that Parliament sends a letter to the government regarding the current media laws on St. Martin and the potential need for amendments considering the current times. The members of Parliament would recall that there is a very old draft of a media law currently on the table. It was one that was drafted during the days of the Netherlands Antilles, taken over by the government at the time to want to continue on. And thus, that proposal is with Parliament and government for the interaction on a draft ordinance. I just wanted to add that. But with all that we have discussed in Parlaméricas, for example, I can imagine that many things need to be added to that draft media law that is currently on the table, more current issues to be added. So that is one that we liaise with government regarding the current media laws, proposal for media laws, etc., and that the committees of Parliament meet more frequently and discuss topics that are relevant to our community. For the biggest part, our committees of Parliament are currently based on the ministries. We do have a few others, but I believe more topical committees would really be in the interest of the Parliament, and also dialoguing with especially the different communities on St. Martin, and I'm talking districts, etc. So that we look at that composition and alignment of the committees of Parliament. I am also proposing, in the context of the discussion, that the Presidium of Parliament looks into the establishment of a committee for climate change, talking about topical committees again, and that an advice be sent to the public meeting from the Central Committee with a proposal for the Parliament of St. Martin to become an associate member of the Parl Americas platform.
Are you SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXV, yeah, your social health insurances.
The opposition People's National Party, PNP, continued its broadside of the Holness administration's handling of the education sector. Shadow spokesman on education Damian Crawford says the lackluster performance in the recent CSEC exams should have been the writing on the wall for the country's education minister, Pavel Williams.
In PEP, 13,000 children this year did not achieve proficiency in mathematics. They asked for bread, they were given stone. 11,000 children did not achieve proficiency in English language. And then when it comes to CXC, it gets worse. Because 18% of Jamaican children get 5 subjects, including maths and English. And then I hear that the Minister of Education is seeking a promotion. What can go so?
He says rather than seeking a, quote, promotion, end quote, the Prime Minister should have asked for her to step aside. For him, a PNP government will make major changes to the education sector.
We have found the stone heap, and we have found the serpent nest. And I guarantee that in 5 years after we take government, we will defeat Trinidad, we will defeat Barbados in CXC the same way we treat them in Carifta. And no cartel is here, but when it comes to education, I am the teacher.
First on his agenda, absenteeism.
In the rural area, 37% absenteeism. And in the urban area, 18% absenteeism. The first thing we're going to do is make sure we have boarding facilities for at least 30% of our school population. And then we are going to give 1 meal per child in school. The JLP will quickly say, how can we afford it? But let me tell you something about afford. They say they can't afford 1 meal per child in school, but they will afford 3 meals per adult in prison. What can go so?
Secondly, he says a teacher retention program will be instituted. This to minimize the number of teachers leaving the island to work overseas. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.